Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are strapping in for a molecular journey that is just fundamental to life itself.
Absolutely.
Cellular respiration and fermentation. This is how cells, whether it's your cells or, that hoary marmot cells, take fuel like sugar and efficiently pull out the energy to make ATP.
Mhm.
So our mission today really is to give you a clear path through what can be a pretty complex process.
Right, to break down the mechanisms and just make sure you understand the chemical logic behind, well, what is life's greatest energy conversion system.
Okay, so before we dive in, let's set the scene. Where does this all fit?
Let's zoom out. So you have energy flowing into the whole ecosystem as light, right? Photosynthesis captures it,
Mhm.
and it exits as heat. But inside the cell, we're talking about chemical energy conversion.
Right.
We're basically tracking glucose, following its electrons as they move from these high potential bonds down to lower energy states.
And that movement is what turns fuel into ATP.
Exactly. ATP is the chemical drive shaft. It powers everything from muscle contraction to just moving ions around.
And we're going to track this through three main stages for aerobic respiration.
Three big ones.
First up, we have glycolysis. That's the initial sugar splitting, and it happens right out in the main fluid of the cell, the cytosol.
Mm-hmm.
Second, we move into the mitochondrion for pyruvate oxidation and the citric acid cycle.
That's where we finish oxidizing the fuel, releasing CO2.
And then the grand finale, oxidative phosphorylation,
A big moment.
where the vast majority of ATP gets made by this just stunning molecular machine.
But before we even get there, we have to talk about the chemical foundation. We need to understand redox reactions.
Okay, redox, oxidation and reduction.
Right. So simply put, oxidation is the loss of electrons, and reduction is the gain of electrons.
I see.
And if you look at a fuel molecule, like glucose, it's packed with CH bonds. Those electrons are holding a ton of potential energy.
They're like hilltop electrons,
Right,
right?
that's a perfect way to put it. They're at the top of an energy hill. And the whole point of cellular respiration is to let those electrons fall down that energy gradient,
All the way down to the final electron acceptor.
which is the very electronegative oxygen atom. And that fall releases energy.
But not all at once.
Not all at once, no. That would be an explosion. A violent, useless waste of energy. The cell is much smarter. It uses the electron transport chain, or ETC.
And that breaks the big energy drop into smaller, manageable steps.
Exactly. It harvests the energy gently along the way.
Okay, so to manage this controlled descent, the cell needs shuttles, right, to carry the electrons.
It does.
So walk us through the main one, NAD+.
NAD+ is our critical initial electron carrier. It's an oxidizing agent. You have these enzymes called dehydrogenases that come along and strip two high-energy electrons and a proton from the fuel
And that reduces NAD+ to...
to NADH, which is now holding all that stored potential energy. NADH is like a little rechargeable battery ready to carry that energy over to the ETC.
Got it. And just to be clear on the terminology for everyone listening,
Yeah.
we mostly talk about aerobic respiration, which needs oxygen. But cellular respiration is actually a bigger umbrella term.
It is. It includes anaerobic respiration, which uses an ETC, but with something other than oxygen at the end, like sulfate. And then you have fermentation.
Which is totally different.
Totally different. It's a partial breakdown of sugar that uses neither oxygen nor an ETC. It's just glycolysis on a loop.
And when we talk about making the ATP itself, there are two different methods at play.
Two very different ways, yeah. First, you have the direct method, substrate-level phosphorylation.
Sounds complex.
It sounds it, but it's really straightforward. An enzyme just grabs a phosphate group from some high-energy organic molecule and slaps it directly onto an ADP. Boom, you have ATP.
And this happens in...
In glycolysis and the citric acid cycle. It accounts for a tiny amount of the total ATP.
Because the real payoff comes from the second method.
Oxidative phosphorylation. It's powered by all those redox reactions in the ETC, and it makes almost 90% of the ATP. It's the whole reason the ETC exists.
Okay, let's start at the beginning then. Glycolysis. Sugar splitting.
The sugar splitting, yeah. 10 steps happens right in the cytosol outside the mitochondria.
Should we take one 6-carbon glucose molecule?
Then we break it into 2-3 carbon molecules of pyruvate.
And this whole thing is split into two phases.
Exactly. First up is the energy investment phase.
You have to spend money to make money.
That's it. The cell invests 2 ATP molecules to get the process started. For example, the very first enzyme, hexokinase, uses an ATP to stick a phosphate onto glucose.
Why does it do that?
Well, that glucose 6-phosphate now has a negative charge, so it can't easily leave the cell. It's trapped inside, ready to be processed.
Ah, clever. So that's the investment. Then comes the payoff.
The energy payoff phase. This is where we generate 4 ATP through that substrate level phosphorylation we just mentioned, and we reduce 2 NAD plus molecules to 2 NADH.
So the net gain from glycolysis is?
2 net ATP and 2 NADH. And it's crucial to remember, no CO2 is released here, and this all happens whether or not oxygen is around.
Okay, so now let's assume oxygen is present. That pyruvate still holds a ton of energy. It moves from the cytosol into the mitochondrion. What happens next?
This is a quick but essential transition step. Each pyruvate gets processed by a big enzyme complex.
3 steps.
3 quick steps. 1, a carboxyl group gets snipped off and releases CO2. This is the first CO2 you breathe out.
Okay.
2, the remaining 2 carbon bit is oxidized, and that reduces an NAD plus to NADH. And 3, that high-energy fragment gets attached to something called coenzyme A,
Forming acetyl-CoA.
forming acetyl-CoA. And that is our ticket into the metabolic furnace.
The citric acid cycle, also called the Krebs cycle.
Exactly. This cycle is really the heart of the whole process because it completes the oxidation of our fuel. It's a loop. Acetyl-CoA, our 2-carbon input, joins with a 4-carbon molecule, oxaloacetate,
To make the 6-carbon molecule citrate?
to make citrate. And then over 8 steps, that citrate is broken down. 2 carbons are released as CO2, and this is the important part, that 4-carbon oxaloacetate is regenerated at the end.
Which is why it's a cycle. It's ready for the next acetyl-CoA.
It keeps the engine running.
Let's do the accounting. For every single turn of this cycle, what do we get?
Okay, so per acetyl-CoA, we generate 3 NADH, 1 FADH2, which is a similar electron carrier, and 1 ATP equivalent.
And since 1 glucose gives us 2 pyruvates, that means 2 acetyl-CoA, so we run the cycle twice.
You double everything. For 1 glucose molecule, the cycle harvests 6 NADH and 2 FADH2 plus 2 more ATP.
If you look at where we are, we've only made 4 net ATP so far.
Right. The vast majority of the energy is still locked up in all those NADH and FADH2 molecules.
Which brings us to the molecular late show. Oxidative phosphorylation. Time to cash in those carriers.
And this all happens on the inner mitochondrial membrane, which is highly folded into these structures called cristae. That folding just massively increases the surface area.
So the electron transport chain.
For the ETC, yeah. It's a series of 4 huge protein complexes. NADH drops its electrons off at complex 1 at the highest energy level, but FADH2 enters later at complex 2.
And that's a key detail, isn't it? Entering later means a shorter fall.
A shorter fall, exactly. So less energy is harvested from its electrons compared to NADH, and that directly means a lower ATP yield later.
So the electrons move down the chain through carriers like ubiquinone?
And the cytochromes, yeah, losing a little bit of energy with each transfer.
Until they get to the very bottom of this energy cascade.
And waiting there is oxygen, highly electronegative. It's the final electron acceptor. It grabs those electrons, picks up some protons, and forms
Water, H2O.
the final waste product.
Yeah.
Without oxygen there to pull the electrons off the end of the chain, the whole thing just backs up and stops.
But, okay, the ETC itself isn't making the ATP.
No, it's not.
It's using the energy from those falling electrons to do something else first. It's building the proton motive force.
That's the key. As electrons move through complexes I, 3, and 4, the energy they release is used as a pump. It actively pumps protons, H+ ions, from the mitochondrial matrix into that tiny inner membrane space.
So you get this huge buildup of protons on one side of the membrane.
A massive concentration gradient. And that gradient, storing all that potential energy, is the proton motive force.
And that force is what drives the actual ATP generator.
The spectacular molecular machine called ATP synthase. It's arguably the most incredible machine in biology.
It's a tiny rotary motor.
It is. The protons are desperate to flow back down their gradient, and the only way they can is through a channel in ATP synthase. This flow of protons causes a part of it, the rotor, to physically spin.
Really, it spins.
It spins incredibly fast. And that rotation is transferred down a rod to the catalytic part of the enzyme, forcing it to change shape and slam a phosphate onto ADP to make ATP.
It's a mechanical action causing a chemical reaction.
Exactly. And that whole coupling mechanism is called chemiosmosis.
So if we add it all up, the textbook number is usually around 32 ATP per glucose.
About 32, yes. But that about is really important. It's variable for a few reasons.
Okay, why?
First, the math isn't clean. 1 NADH gives you about 2.5 ATP. 1 FADH2, because it enters later, only gives you about 1.5. It's not whole numbers.
Right. And what's the second reason for the variability?
The shuttles. So the NADH from glycolysis is made out in the cytosol. It can't cross the inner mitochondrial membrane.
It needs a shuttle.
It needs a shuttle. And depending on the cell type, one shuttle might pass the electrons to NAD plus inside, getting the full 2.5 ATP yield. But another type of shuttle passes them to FAD,
Ah, which means you'd start lower down the chain.
and you only get 1.5 ATP from those cytosolic NADH electrons. That alone changes the total maximum.
Okay, and the last factor.
It's just supply and demand. That proton motive force is so useful, the cell sometimes diverts it to do other work, like actively pulling pyruvate into the matrix.
So every proton used for something else is one less proton available to make ATP.
Precisely. It reduces the final yield.
We even see this intentionally bypassed in brown fat for making heat.
Yes, in brown fat tissue, you find these uncoupling proteins. They basically poke a hole in the membrane, letting protons rush back through without making any ATP at all.
And all that energy from the gradient.
It's released directly as heat. It's essential for hibernating animals or for newborns who can't shiver well.
So let's shift gears. What happens when there's no oxygen? The whole ETC grinds to a halt.
It does. Oxidative phosphorylation stops, but the cell still needs ATP to live. This is where fermentation comes in.
And its main job isn't even to make energy, right?
Not really.
No.
It only nets the 2 ATP from glycolysis. Its real job is to keep a continuous supply of the oxidizing agent, NAD plus Rent.
Because if the ETC is blocked, NADH has nowhere to drop off its electrons.
Right. So you run out of NAD plus Ran, and then glycolysis itself stops. Fermentation is the workaround to regenerate NAD plus strand.
There are a couple of types.
In alcohol fermentation, which yeast uses, pyruvate releases CO2 and is then reduced by NADH to ethanol. That frees up the NAD plus Ran.
And in lactic acid fermentation, the kind used for yogurt or that happens in our muscles.
There's no CO2 release. Pyruvate is just directly reduced by NADH to form lactate, again regenerating that critical NAD plus dandel.
The efficiency difference is it's staggering. 2 ATP versus a potential 32.
Which is why organisms like yeast, which are facultative anaerobes, has to burn through sugar at a much, much higher rate when they switch to fermentation.
It really makes you think. The fact that glycolysis is universal across all life and happens in the cytosol.
It strongly suggests it's an ancient metabolic heirloom. It probably evolved in prokaryotes long before there was even oxygen in the atmosphere. It's life's original energy plan.
Finally, we should touch on the versatility of this whole system. It's not just about glucose.
Not at all. Glycolysis and the citric acid cycle are major metabolic interchanges. They're hubs. Proteins can be broken down to amino acids.
But they have to be deaminated first.
Their amino groups have to be removed, yes.
Yeah.
Then they can enter the pathways at various points.
And fats are the real energy powerhouses.
Oh, absolutely. Fatty acids go through beta oxidation, which chops them into 2 carbon fragments that feed right into the cycle as acetyl-CoA. Because they have so many CH bonds, they yield more than twice the ATP of carbohydrates.
And this all works in reverse too, right? For building things.
Yes, these intermediates can be siphoned off for anabolic pathways, for making new proteins, or storing fat if there's an energy surplus.
So the whole system must have incredibly tight control.
Flawless control. It's mainly through feedback inhibition. If the cell has plenty energy, the pathway slows down. If it needs energy, it speeds up.
And the main control point, the pacemaker of the whole operation, is an enzyme in glycolysis.
Phosphorylation, step 3 of glycolysis. It's the gatekeeper.
And what controls it?
High levels of ATP and citrate, both signals that the cell is flush with energy. They inhibit it. They slow it down.
But if the cell is low on energy?
Then you have high levels of AMP, which is the signal that ATP has been used up. AMP stimulates phosphorylation, telling the pathway to get going and make more ATP.
It's just a breathtakingly elegant system. So to recap for everyone, the energy flow is from glucose,
To the electron carriers, NADH and FADH2,
which power the electron transport chain,
which creates the proton motive force.
which then drives ATP synthase to generate a massive amount of ATP.
It's the foundation of cellular life. It's complex, efficient, and beautifully regulated.
Absolutely. So here's a final thought for you to chew on. We know high ATP inhibits the pacemaker, phosphorylation, but in a muscle cell during intense activity, you need ATP now. So how might the cell use the presence of AMP, rather than just the absence of ATP, as a more sensitive, immediate signal to ramp up glycolysis and meet that urgent demand? Think about the speed of that feedback. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into molecular biology.
Thank you for letting us guide you through this essential molecular journey. We hope this deep dive into the mechanisms helps you retain this critical information.